So you want to play the Executor in DnD, because you can't come up with an original idea for a character, and the session starts in 2 hours, so you just adapt your favorite character from whatever it is you're hyper obsessed with at the moment, and hope that no one at the table notices. Yeah, me neither. Anyway, I think I can help with that. So in order to effectively play the Executor, I feel like we kind of need to have a couple of prerequisites to really fit that flavor that he brings. 1, our Suncatcher, his main ability. 2, status effects, though vanilla D&D is a little bit limited. And 3, our Crucible Beast. I have 3 different setups to make this build work, with some wiggle room depending on your playstyle. Starting with the most basic of the builds, we're going to start with a Human Fighter. This gives us access to 2 weapon fighting for dual wielding, or great weapon fighting for 2-handing. As well as we get all the armor proficiencies, because yes, look at Executor, he is covered from head to toe in armor. Would this mechanically count as full plate or half plate? I don't think it matters. If you're going to go with a full strength build, then I recommend full plate. But if you're going to have enough dex to get the full benefit, then I recommend half plate. The weapon of choice is going to be the longsword, just reflavored as a katana for strength, or scimitars if you're going down the dex fighter route, since a longsword doesn't scale off of dex. However, if your DM allows them to scale off of dex, then just go with a longsword. But for the 2024 rule set, that Nick mastery on the scimitars is very, very tempting. Just getting an additional attack every turn, especially in the early game, allowing you to attack twice and then still have a free bonus action is very, very good. But even if you go for the longsword and your DM doesn't allow them to scale off of dexterity, I still recommend that you keep a scimitar or any finesse weapon that you want on your person to act as your Suncatcher. You'll see what I mean in a second. If you're doing the origin feats with 2024, then I recommend either skilled, savage attacker, or lucky. At level 3, we're going to go into the Samurai Fighter subclass. Not only does this fit thematically, but the advantage on demand is very, very good. At level 4, we grab Defensive Duelist. Now, hear me out. The ability itself reads, if you are holding a finesse weapon and you get hit with a melee attack, you can add your proficiency modifier to your AC, potentially turning that hit into a miss. So this means that using the rules on swapping weapons, that we can spend our turn attacking with our strength longsword, and then if we believe that we're going to be attacked, we can easily swap weapons from our longsword to our scimitar to act as our Suncatcher. So we can fully utilize Defensive Duelist even if we aren't always using a finesse weapon. We would take the Samurai Fighter to level 5 before we start branching off, mainly for that extra attack, which is oh so useful. Now I did want to mention that one of the most difficult things when it came to adapting the Executor was his beast form. Honestly, it feels like the simplest solution that requires the least amount of setup or commitment is just to have an item that gives you access to polymorph or to shape change. But this requires your DM to approve of that and either give you the item along the way or let you start with it. So the second best idea that I had would be taking 2 to 3 levels into Druid and going for the Circle of the Moon. This would grant you access to CR1 level creatures like the Direwolf, Brown Bear, or Giant Hyena. Any of these can be comfortably reflavored into the Crucible Beast, since size-wise, the beast would be within the same category. The beast is a little bit taller than the tallest creature here, but if the stats stay the same, I don't see why any DM wouldn't allow the flavor change. So for simplicity, let's say you take 2 levels into Circle of the Moon Druid to be able to turn into a Brown Bear. For the Druid spells and cantrips, I'd say grab whatever you want, personal preference. The cantrips aren't really that important for the build. I'd recommend either Guidance or Mending, as generally good cantrips, but for something more thematic, I recommend either Frostbite, Create Bonfire, Gust, or Poison Spray. For the level 1 spells, you have a lot of good options that work with the build, like Absorb Elements, Fairy Fire, Jump, or Longstrider, as well as it also has a lot of just generally good spells at this point, such as Charm Person, Detect Magic, Entangle, or Goodberry, and Cure Wounds. So just mix and match to your heart's content. But since we are a Samurai Fighter, I do heavily recommend Fairy Fire. At Fighter level 6, if you went with the Dex dual wield route, then definitely grab the dual wielder feat here. Or you can grab the Poisoner feat, giving you the possibility to poison an enemy as a bonus action. Even if your DM gives you a weapon that can apply poison, this feat is still good for bypassing resistances, as well as making and selling poisons isn't a bad way to make money. Or if you don't want either of these, you can grab Alert at this level, just for something that's consistently good. At this point, we could just keep going into Fighter and then rely on loot to complete the build. Rapid Strikes at level 15 is literally free if you have Fairy Fire, and Strength Before Death is a great way to not die. At levels 8, 12, 14, and 16, we go for the ability score increases to max out our Dex or Strength, and our Wisdom. You get 20/20 if you're using Point Buy, or 20/19 with Standard Array. Second, this one has a tad bit more flavor and less moving parts. A Shifter, Path of the Giant Barbarian. For your flavor of Shifter, either Beast Hide or Longtooth will work just fine, but if you want that immunity to advantage while shifted, go for Wild Hunt. Similarly to the last build, we're going to be rocking with Half Plate with a Longsword and our Finesse Suncatcher. However, we cannot ignore the possibility of using dual scimitars while raging. With the Nick Mastery at level 1, you can attack 3 times on an average of 19.5 damage per turn compared to the 10.5 of a two-handed longsword. Please correct me if I'm doing my math wrong, but the way that I am reading this, when dual-wielding light weapons with the Nick Mastery, you can make an additional attack once per turn as part of the attack action, and then make an additional attack as a bonus action. Additional attacks do not benefit from your strength modifier, but they do benefit from your rage modifier, giving us on average 3.5 plus 2 for strength plus 2 for rage, and then an additional 3.5 plus rage, then 3.5 plus rage. Even if I am wrong and you don't get that third attack, that is still 13 damage per turn, which is still higher than the longsword. Honestly, the main reason we picked Path of the Giant Barbarian is the ability to increase our size, and then we can reflavor that into our beast form. At level 3, we get Giant's Power and Giant's Havoc. Giant's Havoc increases our melee range and gives us the option to become large when raging. This can easily be reflavored into our beast form. And with the Shifter bonuses, this really sells that Beasteel transformation. With Longtooth, you get a bonus action bite attack. Beast Hide gets temporary HP and a +1 to AC, and Wild Hunt gets immunity to advantage, allowing you to reckless every single turn without any downsides. At level 4, same thing. We grab Defensive Duelist and weapon swap to our Suncatcher whenever we want to parry, unless we are using dual scimitars to begin with. At level 6, we get Elemental Cleaver. This is basically a free 1d6 of any of these elements whenever we enter Rage, and we can swap it out every bonus action. We could also throw our weapons like Kratos, but this isn't really important for the build. At level 8, if we go for dual wielding with light weapons, we definitely want to grab Fighting Initiate for that 2-weapon fighting style. But if you're going for the two-handed approach, then definitely go for Great Weapon Fighting to reroll ones on damage. We can honestly keep going down the Path of the Giant for this setup. Mighty Impel and Colossus both play into that monster fantasy. Impel lets us throw around creatures of medium or smaller. Colossus lets us grow to huge size and throw creatures larger or smaller. As well as Colossus also increases our cleaver damage to 2d6. And nothing in the subclass says that we are forced to grow in size whenever you rage, so you can just rage for the physical benefits but remain at your medium height. However, if you want to get freaky, we can multi-class into Rogue, and since we don't really need anything from Barbarian past level 6, we can put 12 levels into Rogue, or at least 4 if your campaign ends at level 12. This still grants us a lot of good things from the Rogue's kit, like Expertise, Sneak Attack, Cunning Action, and a Rogue subclass for those ending around level 12. For those going all the way to 20, you get way more. 66 Sneak Attack, Uncanny Dodge, Evasion, Reliable Talent, Expertise again, and 4 ability score increases. And honestly, the Rogue subclass doesn't really matter, so it's more of a dealer's choice here. The feats I recommend for this setup go as follows. Poisoner for the condition application, Alert and Observe It for just generally good feats, or you can just say f it and just put all the ability score increases to max out your strength and con. This build was simpler with less moving parts after level 8, so I'd say it's free ran as to what you want to multi-class into, depending on your table's home rules. The last setup I had in mind is a bit odd, but this is my favorite class, so I had to come up with an excuse to use it here. Now hear me out, a Warforged Monk. I mean, come on, it makes sense to me. Just off of Monk features alone, we get Step of the Wind for those double dashes like Surge Sprint, Deflect Attacks and Patient Defense for Suncatcher, saving us from having to grab Defensive Duelist, Dexterous Attacks and Dedicated Weapons so that you can completely ditch Strength if you want to. And I feel that a Warforged fits here thematically since the Executor did have his armor infused onto his body. With a 15 in Dexterity and a 16 in Wisdom, with the Warforge's +1 to AC, you can have an AC of 16 by level 1. For Origin feats, same thing, go for Lucky, Skilled, Savage Attacker, or if you want to be extra safe, go for Magic Initiate, picking up Shield and Mending. At level 3, we go into Kensei, giving us proficiency with a longsword and letting us use Dexterity for attacks and damage. We also get Agile Parry whenever we punch somebody in the face as part of our action. We get a +2 to our AC until the start of our next turn, which can stack with Defensive Duelist if you still choose to grab it. We also get proficiency with Painter's Tools at this level, which I feel fits the Executor perfectly since he is a painter. Similar to Barbarian, you don't really need a lot of specific things to make this build work. At level 4 and 8, we grab Poisoner and Mobile. and then start running around spreading poison like you just killed the living pest. Fuck, that took so fucking long. Wait, why did I do this? I could have just grabbed footage of someone else killing him. I hate this guy. Your bonus action would mainly be used for doing unarmed strikes if you're doing nothing else, or applying poison to your weapon. As well as I would say save your focus for patient defense or step of the wind. You don't really need to use flurry of blows in this build. For the beast form, we can really go either way. If you have a 13 in strength, you can put 3 levels into Path of the Giant Barbarian, and only rage as a way to transform. With our high wisdom, we can go into Circle of the Moon Druid for the brown bear. Or if we want to be even less optimal, we can go 3 levels into Wizard, to gain access to Enlarge Reduce, casting on yourself and reflavoring that into your Crucible Beast. Going to Wizard also gives you access to utility spells like Detect Magic, Jump, Blur. This also lets us grab Thunderclap, which can be a decent opt-in for your Beast Roar. The timeline would go like this. You go 5 levels into Monk for all those features, then you go 3 levels into Wizard for Enlarge Reduce, the subclass is completely personal choice, and then you go the remaining levels into Monk till you reach 17. Using the ability score increases to max out Dex and Wisdom, we eventually get access to Evasion, Self-Restoration, Deflect Energy, which further fuels that power fantasy of the Executor perfectly. We no longer take damage on a successful Dex save, so that's like your dodge roll. We can remove one condition from us at will at the end of our turn, kind of like his passive, and we can parry anything. Dragonfire? Parried. Lightning Strike? Parried. A massive animal charging us? Parried. Fuck you. All while applying poison and slashing everything with a katana. Honestly, having that heavily reliance on loot to complete the build is very on brand for the type of character that we're going for. I'd recommend weapons like Flame Tongue, Serpent's Fang, or Sword of Wounding, just to get that early to mid-game elemental weapon feel. For very rare loot, I'd toss in the Bloodshed Blade or the Blade of Medusa. Ideally, you'll get more than one of these during your game, just for some variety. But I think these would fit the character perfectly. And of course, you can't complete a build setup like this without a little bit of homebrew to just push it over the edge from mid to good. Unfortunately, there aren't that many elemental conditions that you can apply, like Ignite, without the use of spells. So I just homebrewed some of them in. We'd call these oils, things that you can apply to your weapons, kind of like the greases. Very simple stuff, a bonus action to apply, a minute duration, an additional 1d8 elemental damage, and the enemy would make a con saving throw versus your wisdom spell save DC. The fire ones would ignite, the cold ones would reduce movement speed by 15 feet, and if you're a real baller, you can add bleed oils. These don't deal additional damage, but instead, on a failed saving throw, the enemy gets 1 bleed stack. And then at 4 bleed stacks, they take 8d8 necrotic damage and all stacks are removed. For balancing purposes, these effects can't stack on themselves, meaning that once you proc the status effect, you only gain the bonus elemental damage until either the duration ends or the enemy succeeds in that saving throw to end the effect. Naturally, with this being a martial class, you can grab all the good feats at whichever level that you really want. Sentinel, Observant, Durable, Tough, or Tavern Brawler can all work with these builds, and during each setup I left a lot of room for personalization. I think that as long as you meet the build requirements, any mixed match of these can work. As well as your own home rules play a big part as to how you set up this character. One of the tables that I was playing at allowed extra attacks to stack on itself, so I pulled the Kensei Monk Giant Barb combo going 6-6. I also grabbed a Tavern Brawler so that I can use Flurry of Blows in Beast form to get that in-game 5-hit combo. I mean, hell, if you have your own build for the Executor, leave it in the comments. I have no doubt you guys can come up with a better build than me. But these are my 3 D&D builds for the Nightfarer Executor. Are these super optimized? Fuck no. But I think they're fun, and I really think that the flavor is there. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And hopefully, I'll see you again.